Hey, Facebook! And if I post this on YouTube later, YouTube. We'll see how that goes. Haven't done a live in a while, and it's Wednesday, and it's supposed to rain in a little while. But it's been very sunny this morning, but I see clouds beginning to form. So I want to share a Wednesday encouragement to you about just what's going on, especially if you call yourself a Christian. And especially if you call yourself a Christian leader and see yourself as somebody who has influence over others. There's a red flag warning out. There was, at least yesterday, fire danger because it's dry right now. And so they're concerned that even a small fire could spread, especially with the winds we had yesterday, and worried that then a lot of things that you wouldn't intend to burn would get on fire. Well, we live in a current culture right now, especially here in the United States, that's pretty hot and pretty fiery. In fact, it feels like we are living in a culture of arsonists right now, especially in the media. And I don't mean like the left media or the right media. I mean both sides that are, and especially with the politicians trying to get you fired up. And what concerns me and what I want to encourage you on is, are you running around with a blowtorch? Are you running around with a torch, a flame, a match, maybe even gasoline, and participating in the arson? Are you contributing to the fires? You say, well, my fire is righteous. You know what? When everyone's an arsonist, it's hard really to notice that your fire is more righteous because everyone thinks they're setting righteous fires. It's interesting that, of course, the Middle Eastern culture that Jesus lived in and that most of the Bible was written in, a lot of deserts. We don't have a lot of deserts here. We have some out west, but the United States is not quite as desert, though, again, out west maybe some. We have the desert of Maine, which isn't like the kind of desert they have. And so in a hot climate like they had in the Middle East, water, of course, big everywhere, but especially in where there's a scarcity of it. And a cold water, cold water is a big deal. And Jesus talked about how blessed it was for somebody who would offer someone else a cup of cold water. Why? Well, because when it's hot out, a cup of cold water really gets your attention and is very refreshing. I watched a pastor on Facebook last few days mocking a person who had been shot and killed. Now, regardless of whether the shooting was appropriate or not, and it was a law enforcement shooting, regardless of the circumstances, even if it was a completely justified shooting, mocking the death of a person. Jesus, God in the Old Testament said, I take no delight over the death of a wicked. And yet to mock that's turning up the heat. That's putting more fire. As we struggle through the pandemic, you may have different opinions on how the government's fighting the pandemic, whether they're doing it legitimately, whether they're overreacting, underreacting, misreacting. But I see a lot of Christians either participating or cheering on those that are mocking the governor, mocking others. In other words, we're running around with our blowtorches or our matches and saying, ha ha ha, isn't all this fire fun? And yeah, I guess really mocking someone, having fun at someone else's expense, especially if you think they're wrong, there is a fun in that. I mean, when I was younger especially, I was really good at roasting. Because you roast with fire, right? But as our culture gets hotter and hotter, and our rhetoric gets hotter and hotter, and our world gets full and more full of anger and mocking, which another word for mocking is scoffing, which there is a psalm that says about it's blessed to not sit in the seat of scoffers, but I guess we don't want to apply that to us, do we? But man, when we can be different, Jesus comes, and he comes into a pretty angry culture that the Jewish culture really was angry at Rome. And you see Jesus say so little about Rome. And then there was a lot of anger and frustration even within the Jewish culture with the Pharisees. And he does call out the Pharisees, but some Pharisees followed him. So he wasn't just like insulting to the Pharisees. He did call out the Pharisees' sin. But many times he was trying to reach them, not just, hey, let's just make fun because it's fun to denigrate people. And the biggest thing Jesus did was to call people towards himself. Now, it's Wednesday. If you call yourself a Christian, and especially if you call yourself a Christian leader, what's your contribution to our culture right now? Are you joining the arson? Are you participating in setting fires? Or maybe we should reach for the cold water. Maybe we could share the good news more than mock and share the bad news. There's a lot of bad news. Perhaps we could pay attention to the fact that there are a lot of hurting people, and there are people who are concerned and scared, and maybe we won't mock them either. Instead, be a beacon of hope, joy, love, patience, kindness. Almost like, oh gee, I think there's a list of something to do with the Spirit, maybe. So just a thought for today. Just an idea of, especially when you jump on the public square, which in the old days meant being around town, now it means being online. Are you setting fires? Are you stoking fires? Are you adding to fires? Are you running around with a torch and gasoline? Are you turning up the temperature and cheering on other people who do, adding to the outrage? Are you distinguishable as a follower of Christ? Because people who maybe otherwise want nothing to do with things of God notice in you a sweetness, a charity, a gentleness, a love. For the people who are tired of the heat, do you have a cup of cold water for them? If you want to reach people for Christ, if you want to save people from the real fire, then perhaps that could be a consideration for how you conduct yourself today, this week. And again, I'm not putting myself on a pedestal, but boy, every time I'm tempted to grab a torch because I'm angry, I try to put down the torch. Hope I'm doing better. Anyway, that's my thought for today. That's my encouragement to you, because it's on my heart. Because I'll tell you, especially watching people who fashion themselves as pastors, who are called pastors, because I'm one. I never wanted to be one, but here I am. Being proponents of the anger and the mockery of the lost and of our lost culture. It just really, it burdens me. It's hard to see. So I figured I'd try to share, but hopefully not a fiery response, but an exhortation towards being ambassadors for Christ, being ministers of reconciliation. God looked at a world full of rebels. He looked at Jerusalem, which was about to kill him, and he cried out, he goes, Jerusalem, how I long to gather you. You weren't willing, but I long to save you. And he hung on the cross and looked at the people who were actively hurting him and said, Father, forgive them. They know not what they do. And they were very aware of what they were doing as far as crucifying him, but he said they don't understand. May that be our attitude. The grace and the peace and the mercy and the joy and the love of the Lord. When he's lifted up, people will be drawn to that. I'm praying for you. I know it's tough. I know these are hard times. We all feel it. Let's encourage one another. Have a good day.